Drake Marchetti leaned in to smell him, and Luke Calloway held still and waited for the nothing he had worked so hard to build. Nothing came back. Drake frowned, pressed his nose harder against the gland that should have been giving off wet linen and bruised pear, and got silence. He stepped back and looked at Luke the way you look at something that has stopped working. "What did you do?" Drake said. "I do not know what you mean," Luke said, and kept his face flat. It had worked. His scent was gone, and a scentless omega was no use to a family that wanted to breed a bloodline and seal it with a bond. He was worthless to them now, and worthless meant they would put him out, and getting put out was the only way free he had been able to think of since the day a town car pulled up to the loading dock and two men in good coats told him to get in. "Get him out of my sight," Drake said. "I am not bonding a broken omega. Tell my father the deal is off." Luke turned for the door and did not let himself smile. He made it as far as the hallway, where the older brother was waiting. Everyone in the house knew Gabriel Marchetti. He ran the part of the business that did not have a logo. In the weeks Luke had been here, Gabe had looked at him twice, both times like he was furniture. He was looking at him differently now. "Come here," Gabe said. His voice was low and carried the whole length of the hall. Luke did not want to. His feet went anyway. Gabe leaned in, to the same place Drake had found nothing, and breathed in slow. He went very still. "There it is," he said quietly. "Wet linen, bruised pear. That warm note underneath, like iron. Same as the day they brought you in." He had been certain this could not happen. "There is nothing there," Luke said, and heard his own voice come out thin. "Your brother just told you. Ask anyone." "My brother smelled nothing. So did the two men at the door, and they are good at it." Gabe straightened, and there was something in his face now that frightened Luke more than anger would have. Certainty. "The whole house thinks you have gone scentless, and I can smell you like you walked in yesterday. Do you understand what that means? It does not mean anything. It means you are mine." He did not say it like a threat. He said it like he had just worked something out. "Everyone in this house lost you. I did not. That does not happen by accident. So whatever you did, whatever your plan was, it is finished. You are not leaving." Before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's story. Luke had spent his whole life being valued by everyone, except the one person whose opinion should have mattered, which was himself. It started long before the rail yards, with a boy who belonged to no one. He had been born somewhere and given up somewhere else, and the paperwork that should have connected those two places had been lost or never made, so that by the time he was old enough to ask, there was no one left to ask and nothing to find. He grew up in the system, in a series of houses that ranged from indifferent to actively unkind, and he learned the thing all such children learn, which is that you are safest when no one has a strong feeling about you in either direction. Love was dangerous because it could be withdrawn. Hate was dangerous because it was usually followed by a hand. The safe place was the middle, the gray, the boy in the back of the room that no one bothered to remember. Luke got very good at the middle. He made himself easy to overlook, and overlooked was the only kind of safe he had ever known. He presented as an omega at 15, in a group home, alone, with no one to explain it to him and no one to tell. He worked out what it meant before the social worker got around to the conversation, because the other kids started looking at him differently, and some of the adults started looking at him worse. An orphan omega is an easy target. People assume you are available because no one is standing behind you. By 16, he had learned to keep his scent flattened with the cheapest blockers he could find and to move through every room carefully, like he had something to protect, which he did. It was himself. He aged out with a backpack and the name of a man who ran a hiring hall for the intermodal terminals down in the Calumet corridor, where the rail lines and the truck routes and the river barges all came together in a roar of steel and diesel that ran day and night. It was hard work, and it did not care who you were, which suited him exactly. He learned to read manifests, to track which container went on, which stack and which train and which truck, to hold a whole shifting map of the yard in his head. He was good at it. For the first time in his life, he was good at something that had nothing to do with how he looked or what his body was worth, and the small, clean pride of it was the closest thing to happiness he had ever owned. He kept his blockers fresh and his head down, and told himself this was a life, a studio apartment with a mattress on the floor, a bus route, a shift. The yard at night under the orange lights, the containers stacked up dark and silent. He was no one, and being no one was working, and he had almost let himself believe it would hold. It did not hold. One evening near the end of a shift, a town car came down the access road where no car like that belonged, and it stopped, and a window came down, and a man Luke had never seen looked at him for a long moment. Luke knew the look. His stomach dropped. It was the look that meant somebody had decided his body was worth something to them. He had spent years learning to be invisible to exactly that look, and that night, with diesel in the air and his clipboard in his hand, it had found him anyway. He learned the rest in pieces. The Marchetti family ran freight and import through the city, the legal half stacked neatly on top of the half that was not, and the older generation had decided it was time to tie the family to another one through a bond. Two bloodlines joined by an omega and the children that omega would have. The younger son, Drake, needed a match. Someone the family paid to scout had caught Luke's scent on a day his blockers had run thin, and reported back that there was an unattached omega in the Calumet yards worth acquiring, beautiful and orphaned, and, best of all, belonging to no one who would come looking. Belonging to no one. The thing that had kept him safe for as long as he could remember was the exact thing that made him easy to take. They did not kidnap him, not in any way that would show on paper. They made his life impossible until the only door left open was the one they were holding. His lease was not renewed. His shifts at the yard dried up, the hiring hall apologetic and unable to say why. A man explained to him over a coffee Luke had not wanted that the Marchetti family was prepared to be generous, that an arrangement was being proposed, that an omega alone in the world would be foolish not to see the security in it. The word security did a lot of work in that conversation. So did the silence after it. The part where they both understood the family could close every other door in the city, and had started already, just to show him the lock. So he got in the car. Not because he wanted to, because by the time they offered, they had made sure there was nowhere else to go. The compound on the lake was beautiful, and it was a cage, and Luke understood both things in the first hour. He was given rooms and clothes and food he could not taste. He was given a tutor in the things a bonded omega of the family would be expected to know: how to stand, how to host, how to be a decoration that could also bear children. He was measured and assessed and discussed in front of him as though he were a horse at auction, and the worst of it was Drake, who came to look at his purchase with a proprietary smugness that made Luke's skin crawl, who touched him without asking because it had never once occurred to him that he might need to ask, who talked about the bond and the heat that would seal it with a wet-mouthed anticipation that made Luke go somewhere far back inside his own head to survive being in the room. He was not beaten. That was almost the worst part, the thing he could never explain to himself in the dark. No one struck him. The cage had soft walls, but every soft wall was still a wall, and the thing they intended to do to him, the bond, the claiming bite an alpha sets into an omega's gland to make the connection permanent, that was a door that only opened one way. Once it was done, it could not be undone. He would be Drake Marchetti's for the rest of his life, tied to a man who saw him as livestock, his own body, turned into the lock on his own cell. He lay awake at night with his hand on his throat, and he understood that he had until his next heat to find a way out, and that there was no way out, because they had closed every other door before he ever got in the car. There was one door they had not thought to close, and it was the house manager who showed it to him without ever meaning to. A beta, the kind of man who survives inside a family like this by being so useful and so unthreatening that he becomes part of the background, who had taken a quiet and careful pity on Luke in the way of a person who has learned to help without leaving fingerprints. He was talking one evening, not to Luke exactly, but near him, about the trouble the family had once had with another omega years ago, one who had fallen ill and lost her scent to a sickness, and how she had become, in the family's eyes, useless overnight, set aside without ceremony, because an omega the alphas could not smell was an omega none of them wanted, and a thing these people did not want was, to them, an empty chair. Luke had stopped eating, the fork forgotten in his hand. An omega the alphas could not smell. An empty chair. The thought arrived whole and would not leave. The bond itself did not depend on his scent. A bite was a bite, and the market left did not care whether the gland under it gave off anything or not. But Drake did. They had not bought him to bind him. They had bought him to show him off. An omega, who smelled like something worth owning, sat at the head of a table to make sons. Drake would not take a defective thing and call it his. Luke had watched the man preen over him for weeks, and he knew that vanity better than Drake did. Make himself worthless, and Drake would throw him back. He could not be sure of it. But he knew the man it was built for, and he was almost sure. He could make himself an empty chair. He could make himself worthless. And worthless, for the first time in his life, would mean free. It took him a while to find the bottle. He was watched, but not perfectly, and the family's own arrogance helped him, because it had not occurred to any of them that their acquisition might damage itself on purpose. On a supervised trip to the clinic where they managed his cycles, he slipped his minder long enough to find the back room and the woman who sold what the front of the clinic did not. She told him what it was. A compound that did not suppress a scent but ended it, that burned out the glands at the root, for good. She told him the price, her hands shaking as she counted his money, and then she told him the other price, the one that came later, that bodies were not built to have this part of them killed, and that the killing did not always stay where you aimed it. He had heard her. He had chosen not to fully hear her. When you are drowning, you do not interrogate the rope. He took it in secret, one night, alone in his beautiful cell, and wrote out the fever and the nausea as it burned through him in the dark. By the time the window went gray, the signal was simply gone. He stood in the bathroom and pressed his wrist to his nose and smelled only skin. He had wanted to laugh and to cry at the same time, because he had done it. He had reached into the one part of himself anyone valued and shut it off, and now he was almost sure they would let him go. That was the plan that walked him into Drake's rooms to be looked over one last time and found wanting. It had worked perfectly on every single person in the house, except the one in the hallway, who could still smell him and who had just told him he was not leaving. The days after that conversation were hard to make sense of. He had won and lost in the same minute, and the two kept landing on top of each other, so that every time he reached for the relief, he found the dread sitting under it. Drake's rejection was real and total, and that part of the plan held. The younger brother wanted nothing more to do with a defective omega, and he made his disgust public in the small ways available to a man like him, declining to look at Luke, speaking about him in the past tense, even while Luke was standing in the room, performing his grievance to the household, so that everyone understood the failure was the omega's and not his own discernment. The bond was off. The tutoring stopped. The careful preparation of Luke's body and manners for a wedding that would never happen simply ceased, and for a strange, suspended few days, Luke existed in the house as a thing that had been canceled, but not yet removed, a delivery refused but not yet sent back. He waited to be put out. He had his small bag packed in his head, the bus route already drawn, the anonymous city already shimmering on the horizon. He waited. He was not put out. Instead, after a few days, the house manager came to him with an expression that was carefully blank and told him that he was being moved, that his rooms were being changed, that the elder Mr. Marchetti had taken an interest in his situation. The elder Mr. Marchetti. For one cold instant, Luke thought he meant the father, the boss, and his stomach turned over. Then he understood that it was not the father at all, but the older brother, Gabe, and that was worse. The household read it the way Luke feared they would, which is to say wrong, and the wrong version was its own kind of trap. The story that went around the staff and the soldiers and the cousins was one everyone already knew how to tell. The younger brother had thrown away a beautiful broken thing, and the older brother, who took what he wanted and answered to no one, had picked it up out of spite. It made Gabe look like exactly what everyone believed him to be, a cold man who wanted a thing more once someone else had thrown it out. No one questioned it. Cruelty was the easiest thing to believe about Gabe, and the cruel version fit him with no gaps. Luke believed it too. Of course he believed it. He had no reason in the world not to. He had spent his life being correctly cynical about the motives of powerful men, and every piece of evidence he had pointed the same direction. So when they moved his things into a set of rooms in the older brother's wing, away from Drake, away from the part of the house where the bond had been planned, Luke walked in, braced for the real version of his captivity to finally begin. The soft cage had been the courtship. Now, he assumed, came the part with teeth. He stood in the new rooms and waited for it. He was good at waiting for the worst. It was practically a profession. The worst did not come. What came instead was nothing. Gabe did not summon him. Gabe did not come to him. The rooms were comfortable and quiet. Meals arrived on time. The lake went on freezing outside the window, and the man who had told him he was not leaving did not appear to collect on it. A day passed. Then another. Luke paced and listened to the house, and could not make the silence mean anything. In his experience, when a powerful man took possession of you, he did it fast, because the point of power was that it did not have to wait. This made no sense, and it scared him more than cruelty would have, because he could not see the shape of it, and a danger you cannot see is the one that gets you. He saw Gabe for the first time since the hallway on the third evening, by accident, in the long room at the back of the house where the windows gave onto the lake. Luke had gone there because it was empty, and he needed to not be in his rooms, and Gabe was already there, standing at the glass with a drink he did not seem to be drinking, watching the ice. He did not turn when Luke came in. For a moment, Luke considered backing out before he was noticed, an old reflex, and then he understood from the set of the man's shoulders that he had already been noticed. That Gabe had clocked him the second he crossed the threshold, and had simply chosen not to make it a thing. "You can stop waiting for me to do something to you," Gabe said to the window. "It is loud, the waiting. I can feel you doing it from across the house." "I do not know what you mean," Luke said, his face closed, his voice empty. "You do." Gabe turned then, and looked at him, and in the gray light off the lake his face was unreadable in a way that was not blankness but control, a thing held very carefully still. "You walk around braced. You flinch toward every door before it opens. Somebody taught you that the only question worth asking about a man is how he is going to hurt you. And it was good teaching, because it kept you alive." He set the glass down on the sill. "I am not going to tell you it was wrong, but I am not in a hurry to prove it right either." Luke did not know what to do with that, so he did what he always did with things he could not place, which was to attack the soft part of it. "Everyone in this house thinks you kept me because Drake threw me away. Because you like taking your brother's leftovers." "I know. Is that not why?" Something that was almost, but not quite, amusement moved at the corner of Gabe's mouth. "If I told you it was not, would you believe me?" "No." "Then I will not waste it." He picked the glass back up. "Believe whatever keeps your guard up. It is a good guard. I would rather you kept it than dropped it for the wrong reason." He looked back out at the lake, dismissing the conversation without dismissing him. And Luke understood he had been given something, and could not for the life of him work out what. He retreated to his rooms with his pulse uneven and a feeling he had no file for. The man had not touched him. The man had not threatened him. The man had looked straight at the armor Luke had spent years forging and had, instead of trying to pry it off, told him to keep it on. It made no sense inside any model of powerful men that Luke possessed, and a thing that does not fit your model is a thing that keeps you up at night, turning it over, looking for the trick. There had to be a trick. He fell asleep certain of it, certain that the patience was the cruelty, that the not touching was a longer way of touching, that any day now the real Gabe would arrive to claim what he had announced in the hallway was his. He held on to that certainty as hard as he held on to all his ideas about the world, because they kept him standing. If even one of them turned out to be wrong, he did not know what else might be, and a man who has survived by knowing exactly how bad things are cannot afford to be caught off guard by kindness. He was going to be surprised by mercy. He did not know that yet. He only knew that the lake was freezing and the house was quiet, and somewhere under the same roof there was a man who could smell a thing in him that he had killed with his own hand, and who had not yet told him what that thing was going to cost. The thing about a man who asks nothing of you is that you start, against every instinct, to watch him. Luke had not meant to. He had meant to keep his back to the wall, and his exits mapped and weighed out whatever this was. But the days stayed quiet, and you can only hold a brace for so long before your arms start to drop. And so, through the long gray afternoons of that winter, he started watching Gabriel Marchetti, carefully, the way you watch something that can hurt you. He noticed that the household feared him, and that the fear was earned. Luke saw it the first time he watched Gabe take a phone call in the back room, watched the man go cold mid-sentence, watched him say 3 quiet words to whoever was on the other end and then end the call. And Luke understood without being told that something had just been decided about a person who would not enjoy the decision. There was a stillness to Gabe when he turned cruel that was worse than any shouting. He was sharp with the men who worked for him, sharp with the cousins who came around looking for favors, sharp in a way that left no room to misunderstand him. Luke saw a soldier twice his size go pale at something Gabe said, in a voice barely above conversation. The world got out of this man's way, and it was right to. And then Gabe would come back into whatever room Luke was in, and the cruelty would just be gone. Not softened, not hidden. Gone, like he had left it at the door, replaced by that patient quiet that wanted nothing. Luke could not square the two men. He kept waiting for the cold one to turn out to be the real one and the quiet one to turn out to be the trap, and the longer he watched, the less sure he got. He did not know what to do with not being sure. He had never had to. Gabe learned things about him without seeming to try. Luke realized it slowly, in small evidences. The food that came to his rooms stopped, including the things he had been quietly leaving untouched, and started being things he actually ate. A book appeared, then another, the kind of plain, unsentimental nonfiction Luke would have chosen for himself, left without comment on a side table, as though they had always been there. When Luke mentioned, once, offhand and testing, that he had hated the tutoring more than anything, because it was teaching him to be a thing instead of a person, the tutoring was never mentioned again, and a few days later, a different sort of arrangement quietly replaced it. Access to the household's accounts and manifests, the family's legitimate freight operation laid open for him to look at, because someone had noticed that the orphan from the Calumet yards could read a logistics map better than the men being paid to. "You are good at this," Gabe said, the one time he commented on it, standing behind Luke's shoulder while Luke traced an inefficiency through 3 shipping routes without quite meaning to. "Better than the people I pay. You saw in an afternoon what took my last man a month to miss. It is just patterns," Luke said. "Things that do not fit. I am good at noticing when something does not belong." He heard the second meaning, a half second after he said it, and so did Gabe, and neither of them touched it. 1. "So am I," Gabe said, and went away, and left Luke sitting there with a warmth in his chest. He resented bitterly, because it was the warmth of being seen for something other than his body, and it was coming from the wrong man, the man who had announced ownership of him in a dark hall. And Luke did not know how to hold both of those facts at once, without one of them cutting him. It would be cleaner, he thought, if Gabe would just be the monster. He knew how to survive a monster. He did not know how to survive this, the slow disarming, the man who kept handing him pieces of himself back and asking for nothing in return. Every kindness was a debt in Luke's accounting, and he kept waiting for the bill, and the bill kept not coming, and the waiting was its own slow erosion of the walls he could not afford to lose. The first time Luke understood the difference between being kept and being protected, blood was involved, and it was not his idea. Drake did not like it. He had thrown the Omega away, and now his brother had picked him up, and a man like Drake did not enjoy watching someone else want a thing he had discarded. He made it known in the small ways available to him. Comments at dinner about why Gabe was keeping a scentless Omega around, a curl of the lip whenever Luke crossed a room. It never went further than that, because Drake was not brave enough to push his brother. But it did not go away. It came to a head on a night when the family had gathered for one of its dinners, the kind where the legitimate face of the business sat at the same table as the part that was not. And Luke had been required to attend because his removal from the house had been quietly reclassified into something the family had not yet found a clean word for. He kept to the edges. He had a lifetime of practice keeping to the edges. But Drake had been drinking, and Drake found him in a corridor between the dining room and the rest of the house, and Drake had a few things he wanted to say to the Omega who had embarrassed him. Luke did what he always did, which was go quiet and small, and let the words go past him, Because you cannot talk a powerful drunk man into being decent, and trying only gives him more to push at. He kept his eyes down. He gave Drake nothing to grab. He held his ground the only safe way a person in his position could, by not reacting, by being a wall instead of a fight, and he waited for it to be over, the way he had waited out 100 moments like it in 100 rooms before this house existed. But Drake was not interested in a wall. Drake wanted a reaction, and when the words did not produce one, he reached for Luke, grabbed a fistful of his collar to shake the silence out of him, and that was the moment the corridor changed. Luke did not see Gabe arrive. He felt the hallway go cold, and then Drake's hand was just gone from his collar. And Drake was against the wall with his brother's forearm across his chest. And Gabe was talking to him in that low, even voice Luke had learned to be afraid of on other men's behalf, turned now, for the first time, in a direction that was not at him. "You do not touch him," Gabe said. "He was not loud." He was never loud. He held his brother against the wall without any visible effort and set it flat, like it was already settled. "I do not care what you tell yourself in your own head. I do not care what story you have got going about leftovers. You put your hand on him again, and we are going to have a different conversation, and you will not like the room we have it in." "He is nothing," Drake said, but his voice had gone high and uncertain, the voice of a younger brother who has pushed a thing too far. "You said it yourself. He is broken. He does not smell like anything. Gabe, he is worthless. Why do you even care?" "Careful," Gabe said, very quietly, and Drake stopped talking. For a moment the corridor held still, the two brothers and the Omega between them, the dinner going on in the next room. And Luke, pressed against the wall with his collar still loose where Drake had grabbed it, understood that what he was watching was not a man protecting his property. A man protecting property is cold about it. "This is mine. Take your hands off it." This was something else. There was something under the evenness of Gabe's voice that no one had ever spent on Luke before, and it took him a moment to place it, and when he did, it scared him more than any threat. Gabe would have torn the house apart before he let anyone put a hand on him. Gabe let his brother go. Drake straightened his jacket, his face caught somewhere between humiliation and rage, and then he walked back toward the dinner, because there was nothing else to do. He would keep his comments and his curled lip, but he would not try that again. Gabe turned and looked at Luke, and the cold was already gone from his face, replaced by that quiet that wanted nothing. "Are you hurt?" Gabe said. Not, "Are you all right?" "Are you hurt?" The question of a man checking for damage. Precise, practical. "No," Luke said. His voice came out wrong. "I'm fine. I did not need." He stopped. He had been about to say, "I did not need you," the reflex of a lifetime, the insistence on his own sufficiency that had kept him from leaning on a single soul since he was a child. And it was true, and it was the most important thing he owned. And for one terrible second, standing in that corridor with his collar loose and the ghost of being defended still warm on his skin, he could not finish the sentence. Gabe watched him not finish it. He did not push into the gap. He just looked at Luke for a moment, something careful in his eyes, and then he stepped back and gave him room, like he always did, and said, "I know you did not. I did it anyway." And he turned and walked back toward the dinner, leaving Luke alone in the cold hallway with a new fact he could not stand, which was that somewhere in the last few weeks, without his permission, in a house he had poisoned himself to escape, he had started to feel safe. That was the night Luke stopped being able to lie to himself about the simplest and most dangerous thing, which was that the danger he was in had changed shape. He had come into this house afraid of being owned. He was still afraid of being owned. But standing in that hallway, watching the most powerful man he had ever met set himself between Luke and harm, and then ask for nothing, Luke understood that there was a second danger now, growing quietly underneath the first. And it was worse, because he could not poison his way out of it. He could kill his scent. He had proven that. He did not know how to kill the thing that had just made his chest ache when Gabe said, "I did it anyway." He lay awake that night like he had so many nights in this house, hand at his throat out of old habit, feeling the dead gland that did not answer anymore. The lake was black, past the window. The house ticked and settled around him. And for the first time since the town car, the thing keeping him awake was not the cage. It was the man who had told him he was not leaving, and who had spent every day since proving, without once saying it, that what he meant by that was something Luke had been certain, since he was a child, did not exist. He lay there longer than he meant to, a thin tiredness pulling at him that sleep would not answer, and he set it down to the cold and the strange new quiet of the house, because he had no reason yet to set it down to anything else. The first time Luke let himself be cared for on purpose, he was already too far gone to pretend otherwise, and he understood that, and he did it anyway. It happened the way it usually happens to people who have spent their whole lives refusing it, which is suddenly, and over something small. He had been sleeping badly for weeks, waking in the dark with his heart going too fast, and a thin, strange tiredness that did not lift no matter how long he lay there. And he had told himself it was the house, the cage, the man, down the hall. One gray morning, he stood up too fast from the table where he had been reading the shipping manifests, and the room tilted, and the floor came up at a wrong angle, and he reached for a chair that was not where he thought it was. Gabe caught him before he understood he was falling. He had not heard him come in. That was the thing about Gabe. He moved without sound, there before you knew it, and one moment Luke was going down and the next there was an arm across his back and a hand at his elbow, unhurried, certain, holding him upright with the same lack of effort that had pinned Drake to a wall. Luke's first instinct, bred into him over a lifetime, was to pull away, to get his own feet back under him, to refuse the help before the help could become a debt. He got as far as tensing to do it. "Do not," Gabe said quietly. Not a command, a request, which was somehow worse, because Luke had no defense filed for those. "You are gray. Sit down before you put your head through the table and make me explain it to a doctor." Luke sat. He told himself it was because his legs were not holding him, which was true, and not because the arm across his back was the steadiest thing he had felt in a long time. He could not give anything off anymore, but he could still smell, and this close he caught Gabe for the first time. Wood smoke and something colder underneath. A scent that did not push at a room the way Drake's had, but sat low and certain, like the man it came off. Gabe crouched in front of the chair so they were level and looked at him with an attention that was not soft, exactly, but complete, the look of a man reading every detail in front of him. "How long have you been dizzy?" Gabe said. "I am not." "How long?" Luke did not answer. He had learned long ago that the truth was a thing you handed to powerful people only after you had counted the cost, and he had not finished counting. But Gabe was already reaching out, slow, telegraphing it, giving Luke every chance to flinch away, and he pressed 2 fingers to the side of Luke's throat, to the pulse there, and held there, counting, his eyes on the middle distance. "That is too fast for sitting down," Gabe said. "And your color is wrong. It has been wrong for a while. I have been watching it." He took his hand back. "Something is making you sick. How long?" "I do not know," Luke said, which was a lie, and they both heard it. Gabe did not press. He looked at Luke for a moment, like he was looking at a problem he had decided to solve whether or not he was handed the pieces, and then he stood. "I am bringing someone to look at you. A doctor. Quiet, careful, asks nothing he is not paid to ask." He paused at the door. "You can fight me on it. You will lose. I would rather you did not waste the energy. You do not seem to have much to spare." Luke wanted to fight him on it. Every instinct said a doctor was a risk, that a body looked at closely was a body that gave up its secrets. But the dizziness had stopped being something he could hide, and there was a part of him, small and traitorous and new, that did not entirely hate being the thing this man had decided to solve. The doctor was a quiet older man who came to the house the discreet way everything did, asking no questions he was not paid to ask. Luke let the man draw blood and listen to his heart and press at the dead glands in his neck, and he watched the doctor work to keep his face still, which told him more than anything the man could have said. The results would take a few days. In the meantime, the house went on around them, and the thing between Luke and Gabe went on too, quieter and harder to name, because they were falling for each other. Luke could not have said when it started. There was no single moment, no line he stepped over. It was the accumulation of small things he had no defense against. the food that arrived already, the way he liked it. The manifests left open on the table because Gabe had learned that Luke's mind settled when it had a problem to chew on. The evenings in the long room at the back of the house, the two of them not talking much. Gabe with the calls he could not avoid, and Luke with the work he had started to enjoy, both of them in the same quiet without either one asking the other to account for it. Keeping people at the length of an arm was the oldest habit he had. He did not know how to keep this man there. The arm kept getting shorter. He learned the shape of Gabe in pieces. That he had been the older son, raised to be the one the family pointed at its problems, while the younger was raised to be the face. That his worth to them had always been his usefulness, never anything softer. Luke heard his own life in it, told at a slant. Two people raised to be valued for a function. Two people who had learned that being needed and being wanted were not the same thing. That is why you can stand the way I am, Luke said one night, the understanding arriving as he said it. Everyone else in this house wants something from me, even the kind ones. You are the only one who has ever been the thing instead of the person. You know what it does. I know what it does. So why bet on me? I will run the first time I see a door. Gabe was quiet for a moment. Because you are the first person who ever looked at me and saw a man instead of a weapon. You did it in a hallway when you should have been running. You asked me what you smelled like. He looked at Luke across the gray light off the lake. Nobody had ever asked me a thing like that, and meant it. I am not betting on you staying. I am betting that whatever you decide, you will decide it yourself, and that is the only thing I have ever found worth being loyal to. Luke did not cross the room to him that night, but he wanted to, and the wanting was no longer a thing he could starve out. The day everything turned, Gabe came in from a long call, sat down across from Luke, and went still in a way Luke had learned to read. "What?" Luke said. Gabe did not answer right away. He leaned in close to the side of Luke's neck, the same place as that first night in the hallway, and breathed in slow. And something crossed his face that Luke had never seen there. Not certainty this time. The opposite of it. It is fainter, Gabe said. The room went cold. What is? You. Your scent. It is still there, but it is not what it was. It is like. He stopped, and for the first time since Luke had known him, the man searched for words and did not find good ones. Like hearing someone in another room and the door keeps closing. It has been getting quieter for a while. I told myself I was imagining it. I am not imagining it. His eyes came up to Luke's. What is happening to you? And Luke, who had learned long ago to hand the truth to powerful men only after counting what it would cost, found that he had already decided to tell him, somewhere in all those quiet evenings, without noticing he had decided. I did something, Luke said, to myself, to get out. He told him. The bottle. The woman in the back of the clinic. The compound that did not hide a scent but ended it, that he had taken in a single night, alone, in his beautiful cell, until the broadcast went silent by morning and Drake lost interest and the arrangement fell apart. He told it flat, the way he told everything that mattered, because flat was the only way he could get the words out. She warned me, Luke said, when she sold it to me. She said sometimes it does what it is supposed to, and stops. The scent dies and the rest of you is fine. And sometimes it does not stop. Sometimes it gets into the rest of you and it does not come back out. He looked at his own hands. I knew that when I took it. I decided getting out was worth the gamble. I did not think anyone would be standing close enough to mind which way it went. For a long moment, Gabe said nothing. Luke braced for the thing that always came after a confession like this. The disgust, the cold accounting of what he had cost. It did not come. What came instead was worse, because it was for him and not at him. The cold came up in Gabe's face. The cold Luke had only ever watched him point at other people, at men who crossed him, at a world that got out of his way. Except this time it went straight through Luke and landed on everyone who had ever stood behind him. You poisoned yourself, Gabe said, very quiet, which was the most dangerous he ever got. You stood in a bathroom in my family's house and put a thing in your own body that you had been told could kill you, because getting away from us was worth dying over. His jaw was tight, and nobody noticed. You were so good at being invisible that you almost did it where no one would even know to be sorry. Do not, Luke said, rough. It was not only them. It was the whole thing, the whole way it works. You cannot put a name on that and break its hands. I can put a name on enough of it. Gabe leaned in and the cold went out of his face all at once, and what was under it was not pity. It was grief. I had you in my own house the whole time. I looked at you across rooms for weeks and saw a problem my brother bought, and the whole time you were dying a little more each day. That is the part I have to live with. I am sorry. Not for the family. For the part where you decided no one was coming, and you were almost right. No one had ever apologized to Luke for the right thing. People apologized for getting caught, for the inconvenience, for the version of the story that made them look better. No one had sat across from him and grieved the simple fact that he had been alone enough to do this. Luke looked at the floor because he could not look at the man's face, and the thing in his chest he had been holding shut for weeks pulled hard against the lock. The doctor's results came back a few days later, and they only confirmed what the fading scent had already said. The compound had not stopped. It was in the tissue around the dead glands, and it had spread into his blood, into the muscle of his heart, and the strain of it was the dizziness and the racing pulse and the gray in his face. The doctor would not put a number on it. Gabe made him try. He still would not, which was its own kind of answer. They tried. Gabe brought in others, specialists who came and went without names, and each one read the same blood and reached the same wall. There were drugs that slowed it, drugs that bought a little time, drugs that only made him sicker, and one by one they were set aside. Nothing reached the thing itself. The compound had done what it was built to do, and it did not undo. It was, exactly as the woman in the clinic had promised, permanent. There was no villain in it. The father did not need to scheme. Drake did not need to plot. There was no door to break down, no enemy to beat. There was just a body that was failing, and two people who had found each other too late. And the worst part of it for Luke was simple. The first time in his life he had wanted to stay, his own hand had already made staying impossible. He pulled away from Gabe in those first days. Of course he did. It was the oldest reflex he had, to leave before he could be left, to refuse the thing before it could be taken. He told Gabe to stop coming to the long room. He stopped reading the manifests. He sat in his beautiful cell and waited to get worse and told himself it was kinder this way, that there was no sense letting a man fall the rest of the way for someone who was already leaving by a door neither of them could lock. Gabe let him have a few days of it. Then he came to the room, and he did not knock, and he sat down on the edge of the bed where Luke was pretending to sleep, and he said, "This is the part where you decide I am better off without the trouble of you. I have watched you do it to yourself your whole life, in the space of 2 weeks. You are doing it now." "I am dying," Luke said. The word came out of him for the first time. Plain. "There is no version of this where you do not lose. Why would you sign up to watch?" "Because the losing is going to happen whether I am in the room or not." Gabe's voice did not rise. "You think you are sparing me. You are not. You are just making sure I lose you twice. Once now, when you send me away, and once later, for real. I am not interested in the first one. I have got no use for it." Luke turned his face into the pillow. "It is not fair to ask you to. You are not asking. I am telling you what I am doing, and you do not get a vote." He reached out and put his hand flat on Luke's back, the way he had that first day, steady and certain and asking nothing. "I have spent my whole life being the thing people used and put down. The one time I find something I would keep for no reason except that it is mine, you want me to put it down too, to be polite about it. No, I am staying. Be angry about it if you want. I have been hated by better men than you, and it never moved me." And Luke, who had built his whole life around the certainty that being wanted was the first step toward being owned, lay there and understood that he had it backward. This man had wanted him so completely that he was choosing to stand in the path of a loss he could not win, asking for nothing, just to not let Luke do the dying alone. It was not a cage. It was the opposite of one. What grew between them after that was not the careful circling of before. It was something with no time to be careful. Luke led him back into the long room. He led him back further than that. The evening stopped being two people in the same quiet, and became two people who had stopped pretending the quiet was the whole of it. There was a night Luke got up and walked the cold floor to him himself, on his own unsteady feet, and pressed his wrist to the gland at Gabe's neck, the old gesture, an omega offering his scent. Except Luke's was almost gone now, and they both knew it. He did it anyway. Gabe took it like it had landed. It was Gabe who said the word first. They were in the long room, late, the lake black past the glass, and Luke had his head against Gabe's shoulder because sitting up had stopped being something he could do for long. "Let me bond you," Gabe said. Luke went still. "You know what I am right now. There is barely anything left to bond to. A bond is not a scent. It never was. It is a bite and a choice, and both of those still work." Gabe turned so he could see Luke's face. "I am not asking, because I think it fixes anything. I know what the doctor said. I am asking because if the time is short, I want it to be ours all the way down, and I want you to die, knowing one person on this earth chose you with nothing in it for him, and meant it, and did not flinch." Luke's eyes stung. "It will not save me. I am not doing it to save you. I am doing it because I would rather have you bonded and dying than free of me and dying, and so would you, and we are both done lying about it." It was the most honest thing anyone had ever said to him. Luke reached up and pulled him down, and that was the answer, and Gabe understood it. The bite, when it came, was not the violent claiming the family had planned for him with Drake. It was slow, and it was asked for, and it was given, an alpha setting his mark into the gland at an omega's neck, not to own him, but because the omega had said yes with his whole failing body. The bond settled into place between them, and Luke felt Gabe arrive on the inside of him, steady and close and real, a presence where there had only ever been quiet. They did not know yet what it would do. Neither of them had bonded before, and neither of them had bonded a dying man, and so neither of them understood, that first night, that they had just done the one thing the doctor had not thought to try. A bond is not a small thing. It ties two bodies together, scent and feeling and the parts underneath that, and Gabe was an alpha in the prime of his strength, and Luke was a body that had been failing for lack of anything to hold on to. The bond gave him something to hold on to. It did not happen all at once, but in the days after, the dizziness came less. The gray began to leave his face. His pulse, when Gabe pressed two fingers to his throat out of the old habit, was slower, steadier, more like the pulse of a man who meant to stay. The doctor, when he came again, could not explain it in any way that fit his training, and said so, and then said that he had seen stranger things in his years working for this family, and had learned to stop arguing with them. The compound was clearing. The body, given a reason, had decided to fight for itself. Drake heard about the bond, of course. The whole house did. He said a few things about his brother tying himself to a sick, scentless omega, and he kept saying versions of it for a while, and then he stopped, because no one was listening, and because Gabe's bonded mate was, against every prediction, getting better, and there is nothing for an envious man to do with a story that refuses to end the way he wanted. Luke's scent came back slowly, over weeks, as the rest of him did. It was close to the old one, wet linen and bruised pear, but the warm iron underneath was gone for good, and in its place was something new, a thread of wood smoke, the same note he had first caught the day his legs went out from under him, and Gabe was there to catch him. Luke noticed it the first time. He pressed his wrist to his nose and smelled himself again, and under himself, the man whose bond had pulled him back from a door he had opened with his own hand. There is a long room at the back of a house on a lake, and the lake is not always frozen now. In the warm months, the water goes blue and open. There is a man in the room who still goes sharp and dangerous on the phone, and soft the moment he sets it down, who has spent the time since pulling his life out from under his father's hand until it is something more his own. And there is an omega beside him, who reads the manifests better than anyone the man pays, who is alive, which neither of them takes for granted, and who carries a bond at his throat that he was not forced into and a scent that is his and no one else's. They were both raised to believe they were worth only what they could be used for. It took a poison, and a near thing, and a bite given in a dark room with nothing in it for either of them but the other, to teach them that was a lie. Gabe was the only one who could still smell Luke when the rest of the house got nothing, and he did not let go of him even as it faded, and he bonded himself to a dying man on purpose. asking for nothing back. It was not fate. There was no scent clicking into place, no destiny doing the work. It was a choice, made by two people who had every reason not to make it, to stay. The end. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the story, tell me your thoughts in the comments. I would love to hear from you.